It was literally like enduring a car crash because it, with the four-wheel steering and all-wheel drive, it spins on axis in the center of the vehicle. You ever seen those like Japanese Kei trucks, the little white mini trucks? You see them in people's yards, like security officers use them. My buddy and I did a challenge. We did a build off. So we built 2 of these in secret against each other. And the idea was that once they were completed, we were going to reveal them to each other and then compete in a series of challenges. I, naturally, went with an off-road theme. He went with an on-road theme. His ended up being C5 Corvette based. It was mid-engine, 6-liter LS, 2-liter supercharger. It was wide, slammed, super rowdy. Looks awesome. Mine was an off-road version. I went mid-engine, used a 4L80E, a 205 transfer case, and then 2 GMT 800 front clips turned back to back and glued together. And the rear drive shaft was 1 U-joint. Front was a big, long, dangly thing. It was a twin turbo 6-liter. That engine at one point had made around 1100 horse. We had it turned down to probably 500 or 600. But you're talking about 600 horse in like a little go-kart truck. We put on coilovers, 33-inch Falcon mud terrains, and I named it Stomper because the inside of the tires lined up with the outside of the body. It looked like a toy car, and Stomper just seemed like a fitting name. And we didn't really get to compete the 2 vehicles against each other like we had hoped, mostly because I kind of sold mine and he didn't get his transmission tuned and like timing just didn't work. However, we did do a giant road trip with them and it was incredibly difficult. It was very trying. I had to get Stomper to Southern California where it was going to live in the desert for the rest of its life. And I'm up in New Hampshire. So you're talking about, this was roughly a 3,500 mile trip. We decided to make Holley LS Fest Texas, the first one they did, our midway point. Like, this is where if we can get them both dialed in by then, we will have some sort of competition against each other, whether it's we go drag race or burnouts or whatever. We decided to tow Stomper to Texas, but we did drive the Corvette, which was the Corvette platform. We drove that one all the way there. It was rowdy, but the transmission was like not right. We had to lie to it about it. I think what it was, the vehicle speed sensor was different. Well, it was not calibrated correctly. Like it didn't have the right amount of tones per mile or pulses per mile because the speed sensor's on the ring gear, not on the output shaft. So we had to like trick it and say that, shift in the second gear at 4 miles an hour, shift in the third gear at 12 miles an hour, and then 17. And it's like, but we're really doing 75, 80. And it wouldn't really hold pressure and it was slipping. And it was difficult to get that one there, but nowhere near as difficult as it was to get Stomper from Texas to Southern California in the middle of the summer through the desert. I wanted to make sure that this was going to be one of like the ultimate road trips for my friends and I. So I have a friend from SoCal that we shipped his car to Texas to be our chase car. Because we could have used like a regular rental car, something nice, comfortable, but it's not, you miss the adventure when you have reliability and comfort. You need something to suffer and persevere through. So his car was a Crown Vic, like the 80s, I think it was a 90 Crown Vic, the boxy one. It was long travel suspension, so like a pre-runner off-road car with 1,000 horse twin turbo LS. Is a rowdy, rowdy car. Thing runs like 10 and a half second quarter mile. And we shipped that out to drive that back with Stomper because we knew that, one, that car's cool, it's fun, and it's going to give us headaches. Like, we need something to persevere through. People who say they traveled across the country, well, did you travel across the country or did you get on I-40 and set cruise control until you hit the other coast? Because like, that's different. Did you immerse yourself in local culture because you were broke down and had to make new friends? So that's why we shipped this car out. And at LS Fest, we showed up there and the president of Holley apparently made a rule about me because I am a little out of control. This Stomper, remember how I said it has GMT 800 front ends, which is like 99 to 06 Chevy, like 1-ton pickup truck? It's got 2 front ends in it. And this was really a test mule for a project that I had been working on with a company called Radio Dynamics for digital proportional front referenced, self-centering rear steer control module. It's an active rear steer control module that it's got all sorts of levels of like adjustability as far as like percentage overdriven from what the front tells it to do or underdriven. It's got total angle limits and, ramping speeds. So it's active. You don't actually have to hit a toggle or a switch or anything. It does whatever the front tells it to do. So both hands on the wheel and the rear is all fully automated. We integrated a feature that it's more active at lower speeds and less active at higher speeds. So you hit a 30 mile an hour threshold and then it becomes inactive. Over that, it initiates an underdriven crab walk. So it like effectively extends the wheelbase and increases turning radius and numbs the steering. This was, again, a test mule for this rear steer project that I had going on outside of the challenge between the two Kei trucks. The point of the digital rear steer control module is so that you can have rear steer, like monster trucks have rear steer, but they have a super archaic setup. It's just done with relays and momentary switches. There's no logic or brain or smarts to it, and it's kind of crap, but they've been dealing with it for 30 years. And I was like, there's a market here. Let's fix this stupid problem. So we put some real logic into it. So it can crab walk and it can turn tighter, and it's just it's a hat trick. If you're not using it for competition to win races in some sort of monster truck or rock crawler, then it's just a toy. I know that this is a tiny little Kei truck with a twin turbo LS engine in the middle with full wheel steer and all wheel drive. I welded the diffs front and rear, and I'm known for burnouts. So when we went to LS Fest, I entered the burnout contest. I stuck it in full wheel drive and I rolled into it real slow. And as soon as it started like chirp and break free, I laid into it and then grabbed the second, and it blew all four tires off and started spinning in a cyclone. The way that felt, I've never felt anything like it in my entire life. It was literally like enduring a car crash, because it, with the four-wheel steer and the all-wheel drive, it spins on axis in the center of the vehicle. Well, these Kei trucks are positioned so that you sit a little over 4 feet in front of axis. And it was hitting RPMs at close, like a little over 1 revolution per second. And you do the math on that, that's 5 G-forces. To give perspective, the space shuttle is regulated at 3.5 Gs. When they were doing Formula One cars on the oval track, they never even made it through qualifying because they were seeing 4.5 Gs, blacking out and wrecking the cars. So we saw 5 Gs in Stomper. What that was like was, so you get spinning and everything starts to get blurry. And then you start feeling the G-forces. The harnesses are holding you in. Like, I bruised my shoulders and my chest from the harness, and it knocked my hands off the wheel, and it knocked the slobber out of my mouth on the inside of my windscreen. And it took every ounce of my energy to pull my foot off of the throttle pedal, which is why they made a rule about me. And they said, you're not allowed to compete in the burnout contest unless you equip this vehicle with a remote ignition interrupter. And I'm like, I just drove 2,000 miles here. You couldn't have told me a couple weeks ago? But apparently they tried. The message never got to me. Before we were allowed to do anything with this thing, we went to Tractor Supply, got a wireless winch remote, tied that relay into the ignition wire in the computer. So we were able to just use the wireless winch remote to kill it from, a couple hundred feet away. But it was the most wild experience ever. When you're in the parking lot at the end of the event and there are people like, do a burnout. And like, usually you're pretty tempted. You like kind of want to do it, but you look around and the authorities are there and you really shouldn't. And sometimes you do. Well, there was people trying to get me to like light it up and Stomper. And there was no way I was doing that. Like, it was not enjoyable. So far, there's only been 3 people to experience cyclones in Stomper. And I was the driver on all of them. And it's not fun. It's something you must endure. It's a stunt, and stunts will always be cooler than tricks. So we finished that up. My buddy's long travel Crown Vic runs 10.5 second quarter mile. That shows up in Texas. He flies in, and now we've got 5 people that are going to take this road trip across the country. And I selected these people specifically to create some sort of social chemistry. We had like the mad scientist, like computer techie guy, and then just everybody had the personality that was going to mix just right. It was nothing but belly laughs the whole time. It took us like 3 days to do 172 miles, because these are basically The Stomper was basically an untested vehicle. It got trailered to Texas, and we'd never driven it on the street, and it really probably shouldn't have been driven on the street. The license plate wasn't even to it because I just grabbed something out of the yard and I was like, this will work. Once I'm out of state, they'll leave me alone. We had cooling troubles, so we were always into that. We blew a radiator. The radiator exploded, and we used the Crown Vic to tow the thing back to a rest stop where we yanked the radiator out. The closest one was like 3 or 4 hours of driving. So everybody stayed in that hot parking lot in the middle of summer in Texas. And we went and grabbed a new radiator, come back, we stuff it in. I stole a trash can from the truck stop, and we cut it all up and made some duct work to like try to direct the air better because the radiator was underneath the cab and it got like no flow. But we finally start moving again, and it's like every time we move, we make it like a couple dozen miles and the thing's overheated again. Like, what do? Like, we ended up smoking the head gaskets. So now every single day was 115 degrees. We had to, on the side of the road in the desert, change head gaskets in this thing. Just a total disaster. So we get this thing all back together. We start moving again. It's still not maintaining. It seems to be a little bit better, but like over time, we're still stacking heat on the temp gauge. We ended up changing the water pump. It started to move. That seemed like that was probably the thing after adding gauges and all, just fighting with it for days. Every 20 miles, we pull over and fight with it. We started moving. We're somewhere in New Mexico, and we're finally sustaining speed because it's nighttime. It's a little bit cooler. And then the spring rate wasn't quite right in it. So the CVs were at a bit of an angle. The operating angle was too steep. So it was creating too much friction and heat. So we smoked the CV. We pull over and it's just steaming like a ball of hot metal. So we're basically done at this point. And we camp out, wait in the morning, and we're trying to find like local speed shops, like, you know, hot rod shops, race car, whatever, so that we can find some heavier rate coils to get the ride height back up to where it's supposed to be, straighten the CVs out. There was a guy I called. It looked like he probably would have something. I called him and he was like, kind of grumpy. He was like, no, we don't have anything like that. But he was kind of our only hope in this tiny little town. I was like, okay, well, he definitely does, because I scoured your Facebook and you've got crap stuck in the corners and behind I see it all. I'm like, so I just went there in person. And like, he wasn't super excited because he already told me no on the phone. Now I'm here in person, it's harder to say no to. And he goes, well, let's go look. And so we found a couple of coils that were like exactly what we needed. I had to modify them some. I had to take the pigtail out of it, make it flat. And then at the end, he was like, that dude was so cool. He was like, yeah, come on in. We'll set up the swamp cooler, give you space in the shop, and you can use all the tools. We get it all done. He ordered us pizza, and we're like, we're telling stories, and now we're friends. And he's like, you're ever in the area, stop in. You got to wonder these encounters if like people are just jaded. Because if you look at the world through the eyes of the media, it's a dangerous and scary place. But if you actually get out there and experience it on a person-to-person level, it's nothing but like love and kindness and good people who actually genuinely want to help. But sometimes they got that wall up, and this dude was so cool. So now we've got this thing fixed. We're now starting to make track. It took us a week to do 1,500 miles. And the first part of it was the hardest part. All of the panels in these cars they're all metal. It's race cars. And they're all just radiating heat from the engine, the cooling system, whatever. So like these panels are all 130, 140 degrees. And like you don't touch stuff. You're just trying to exist. We're slow cooking ourselves. Like if these cars, the interior panels are 140, like we're in an oven. And what is it, 160, I think? You cook a brisket? Like, so we're literally cooking ourselves for a week or so. And when we got out of these cars and stepped into the 114 degree weather, it was like, oh my God, it's so nice out. Which is wild. So we wanted to head north and go see Roswell, go clap some alien cheeks. And we ended up missing the turn and got lost. And then we're in desert. Like, I know that not everybody like lives in the desert, and the people who haven't, most of them haven't really traveled to see what that is. But like, you've got an image of this dry, desolate kind of wasteland. Sorry if you live there. But then we started climbing elevation, and then it started to cool off. And next thing you know, there's like there's fields and there's forest and farms, and like it started to rain a little bit. I'm like, this is the strangest thing ever, because I've been in a desert for a week. And now we're like in these mountains, and it was in New Mexico. I think it was called Cloudcroft. It's like 8,200 feet of elevation. So we went up there. And you get to the top, it was like a movie set. Like these really cool buildings, and apparently you can like rent cabins and side-by-sides and stuff up there. It's like a really cool piece of scenery. So we stopped at a little store, we grabbed some veggies and some tin foil and some meat, and we wrapped it all up, threw it on the turbo header so that we could cook it while we were driving. As we're coming down, it's in the early evening, and there's this big Wile E. Coyote tunnel straight through the mountain. And, we're in this lush green forest. On the other side of that tunnel, when we popped out, it was like golden hour. The most golden sunset you've ever seen. Or on the other side of that tunnel was just desert and like 120-mile view, like just canyons and mountains. And it was like this whole world shift just on one side of that tunnel. It was the most beautiful thing. You get to the bottom of that hill, and there's a state park called White Sands. And it's just a giant patch of like pure white sand, like just dunes. The sun was coming down, and it was like the purple and blue and twilight. It was just perfect. We finally persevered through all of those trials and tribulations of the cooling system and these untested vehicles. And we've got this Stomper to do 90 miles an hour, which you should never do in that. And things are going good. So now everybody's happy, and the weather's a little cooler, and we're dancing, we're running and chasing each other into the sunset. It was like picturesque, ultimate road trip. And, that wasn't necessarily the end of it, but that was the end of like the major events. We got the Stomper to its new owner, where it's now going to live as like a little yard truck, which is crazy. It's a 600 horse high technology piece that's just a yard truck.
You asked for it, and AutoTempest now has an app. So head over to your app store now, download it to your phone, and leave them a great review. So now, whether you go to AutoTempest.com by clicking the link in the description below, or just open up your phone app, you'll be getting access to all the results from all the major listing sites in one place. That is why we love AutoTempest so much. We appreciate their support of VINwiki over the years, of Car Trek, but most of all because it is exactly where I go every day to find my next car.